Hello. The time is 8:31 a.m. on Thursday, April 15th, 2021. I am opening this Grand County Commission special meeting. Present are Tricia Dean, County Commissioner, Gabriel Wojtek, County Commissioner, Kevin Walker, County Commissioner, Jacques Hadler, County Commissioner, Sarah Stocks, County Commissioner, and I spoke to Evan briefly a minute ago, so I know he's planning on being here. And Evan Clapper. Yeah, he is here. Quinn Hall, Clerk Auditor, Christina Sloan, County Attorney, Chris Baird, County Commission Administrator, and Mallory Nassau, Associate Administrator. We will begin this meeting with citizens to be heard. I am asking all citizens who wish to speak to keep your responses to 2 minutes or less and keep them cordial.
Mary, I have one recommendation, possibly,
Yes.
because the noise ordinance is on our agenda, but I think we all agree that we're not ready for that. And so I'm not sure how many of these public comments about the noise ordinance that would be heard at the next meeting. So we could take that item first, and if you guys aren't ready, we could table it and then do public comment so that we defer public comment on the noise ordinance to Tuesday. Just a suggestion.
So go to general business action items first and go to item B, repealing Title 11 noise of the Grand County. That's what you think would be the best. Postpone that till our next meeting.
That's my recommendation, but as you guys.
Well, sounds good to me. Sounds good to me. Would someone make a motion to move to item B on our general action?
I would move to postpone item B until our next regularly scheduled meeting on Tuesday.
Motion by Evan Clapper to postpone item B, which is repealing Title 11, noise of the Grand County General Ordinance and related ordinance number 602 until our regular meeting this coming Tuesday. Do I have a second?
Yeah, I'll second. Jacques will second.
By Jacques Hadler. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye or raise your hand or both. Aye. Anyone opposed? This will be on our Tuesday agenda. So people who are here for public comment, which we will move to now, and you're here to speak on item B, noise ordinance, it would probably be best if you hold your comments until Tuesday. Do we have any citizens to be heard, Mallory?
We have a few folks on, so if you could either raise your hand, send me a chat, or turn your camera on. I see right now, Mark Moore, you have your camera on. Are you here to give a comment or just to listen?
No comment as of now.
Okay.
Just watch. I just want to listen today.
Okay. I can name everybody else who's on, but I'm not seeing any chat hand raising. Scott, you've turned your camera on. Are you here for a comment? Oh. Okay. I think he's just listening.
So I had a procedural question. I think everything we're talking about today, we've also done a public hearing on. And in the past, sometimes we take the comments at the public hearing and then discuss the next time. I mean, just in general, are we doing multiple rounds of comment on, one when we have the public hearing and the second when we do the vote?
It's at the discretion of the chair completely.
Okay,
Yes.
thanks.
I think that is a good idea, and if I wished I would have caught it earlier, I probably would not have had citizens to be heard on this meeting, because we've had these discussions and opportunities. But since it was on the agenda, I felt it was important to move forward. Do we have any citizens to be heard?
It doesn't look like we do.
Okay, thank you. We are to,
This is Cliff Kuntz, and I was hoping to speak for 2 minutes.
oh, okay. Okay, and you heard that we've tabled the noise ordinance until Tuesday. You've heard that, correct, Keith? Cliff?
Yes. I will speak to the aspects of Title V and the Land Use Code that pertain to noise, specifically the ATV sales.
Okay,
Which
I'm
types of
starting
vehicles could be sold.
the timer right now, Cliff. So go ahead.
And then also the part of the Title V and the noise and the land use code that would pertain to the sound limits of the vehicles that are being rented and toured. So my 2 points for 2 minutes. Number one, just going back, not to the list of requests from the Motorized Trails Committee or Ride with Respect, which is the organization that I direct. From this year, there are a bunch of those points that are not quite satisfied by the draft before you. But just going back to last year's letters from those organizations, both, one of the biggest pieces was mandatory education. I understand why you wouldn't do it as a standalone. But in combination with these other things, I would just like you to explain why you would pass up an opportunity when you're spending through the Moab Area Travel Council, I think hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on education. And it seems like the distribution and getting people to actually consume that educational material is one of the toughest parts. And here you have all these businesses that are basically in perfect position to do that. The second point about the actual sound standards is just to remind everyone, because there's talk about these different numbers and it's hard to put them in context. In fact, your noise expert referred to the 92 decibels by J1287 for UTVs as just catching the worst offenders. But as I've said, that level would force a quieting of 3/4 of the units that are actually on the streets and the trails, including the commercial units.
Okay, your 2 minutes are up. Can you draw it to a close?
To a level that is noticeably better. It just so happens that it's not just the sound quantity, but the quality, the frequency is better for those other units. And the final thing is that the dozen states, they all do 96 for UTVs, even municipalities. You won't find anywhere else in the country that's as low as 92. And so this shouldn't be dismissed. Thank you.
Thank you, Cliff. Okay.
Mary, I see somebody iPhone is raising their hand. Do you have something to say?
I do. My name is Brett Stewart, president of Utah OHV Advocates. I listened in on the Moab City Council meeting the other night, and I was very happy to see that there's a little bit of compromise moving forward. We're trying to satisfy everybody, which will never happen, but it was a very positive meeting. One thing that I would like to recommend to think about on the noise, I know that we're going to move it to the Tuesday agenda, but I would like to see something put into place to where it would hold up. I think Cliff went out with a group of people and they come up with a decimal reading of 93, which is stock Polaris or a stock item that comes from the factory could pass. But if you drop the level down to 92 or below, I think it'll never hold up in court if you was to cite any of the operators of that machine, because any judge that says that I'm going to enforce a law that the factory can't even meet, I think it'd be a mistake, but if you was to put it at 93, I think it'd be passable and it'd hold up in court. So that's just a recommendation. If we could bump it to 93 instead of the 92, I think it'd hold up. And just so you know, on federal land, it's 96. So I think with what Moab City is coming up with, I think is a good move in the right direction. So with that, thank you for allowing me to voice my opinion.
Thank you. Is that it, Mallory?
I believe that is it for public comment.
Thank you. We are moving to item A, adopting ordinance approving amendments to the Land Use Code LUC Section 3.1, Use Table 3.2.3, Commercial Use Standards 3.4.9H, Vehicle Sales and Service, and 10.2 Definitions. Christina Sloan.
Okay, guys, I'm just working off the packet, and that's the packet that was updated last night. So if you guys want me to screen share, I will. Otherwise, I'll assume we're all on the same page. So we're first looking at changes to the land use code. Again, we do have a deadline of April 18th to pass changes. The first section with proposed changes is in section 3.1, and the red line you see there are recommendations made by the Planning Commission. There is a choose your own adventure related to ATV sales. And so we might want to change these blocks related to ATV sales. If you don't want to pass any restrictions related to ATV sales, we could still distinguish them in this way and allow them in different zones, or we could eliminate all of the red line in the vehicle sales portion. So keeping that in mind. 3.2.3K is related to general outfitters. And as we discussed at our workshop, as drafted, if you use an ATV in any capacity in your business, you're going to qualify as an ATV business. And so Reed Pendleton has alerted us that, hey, you know, he as a hunting outfitter uses an ATV. And so in discussing with that, and I have proved up his use through the BLM, he does have special rec permit with ATVs in the Price district. He would qualify as an ATV business, and just like our other ATV businesses, he would be required to comply with the same rules. 2A is highlighted only. This is left over from our workshop. That was just a slight change showing us that anyone who uses the ATV is an ATV business. 2D is something we might want to delete if we are not going to treat ATV sales differently. We don't need that if ATV sales aren't spelled out. Subsection T is a choose your own adventure. This is the only one in the land use code proposed. Option 1 is electric only. This is what your planning commission wanted to see. And this would require all ATVs sold in Grand County to be electric. Reed Pendleton did bring up a good point in the workshop that as far as I know, there's only one electric ATV model that's hitting the market in the next year. And the exclusive dealer for that is Scott McFarland. So Reed's point is, well, if you do this and there's only one electric ATV and Scott has the exclusive contract to sell that in Grand County, then no one else can sell. You know, it's a prohibition for everyone else. I don't know what other electric models are out there or might be coming, but it was a comment that I think is worthy of consideration. Option 2 would be, hey, you can do ATV sales as long as it's compliant with the 88 dBA, which is our future dBA level. Quite frankly, I probably, so that we don't have to change this if we end up changing the 88 dBA in the future. If y'all like option 2, I'm going to propose a slight rewording so that's a little bit more vague, just referencing, you know, that future dBA level in table 1. Option 3 would be, hey, you can sell ATVs if it's compliant with our current noise ordinance. So whatever year we're in that table, all ATVs sold would have to already have a muffler installed or already be stock at that dBA. And option 4 would be no regulation, with a proposal that we delete the ATV sales distinctions in the use table, but that's not necessary because, again, the ATV sales proposed in the use table are in slightly different zones. 3.4.9H is not an interest. I mean, I guess we might want to eliminate that. We will want to if you guys want to pick option 4. Otherwise, it just distinguishes that vehicle sales does not necessarily include ATV sales. 10.2, I do want to highlight this because we got a couple of comments on including clustering development pattern, overnight accommodations, and short-term definitions here. This is our 5th public meeting discussing these definitions. They are taken exactly word for word out of the code, so we're not doing anything new. But clustering development pattern, this additional language in red, comes from our PUD section. And in the PUD section, there are reasons or purposes for using the PUD, and this additional red language is in there. So all it's doing is making our definition that's in 10.2 consistent with our PUD section, because right now they're not. So it is really just a cleanup matter. And then overnight accommodations and short-term accommodations is defined in 6.15, but it only applies, as written, it only applies to issues under 6.15. So I can't use them in general compliance and enforcement matters. So I need these definitions here for that reason, but there's nothing interesting about those definitions. Any questions for me before you guys get into discussion?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Evan?
to start the discussion, I would go ahead and put a motion on the table.
Thank you.
I move to approve the proposed amendments to Land Use Code Section 3.1, 3.2.3, 3.4.9H, and 10.2 with the choose your own adventure option of option 3. Is that clear enough for the record?
Christine, is that clear enough, do you think?
I think
Sound?
it is.
Yes.
So I'll
Okay.
second.
Okay, motion by Evan Clapper, seconded by Jacques Hadler. Open for discussion.
I'm with Evan. I like option 3. And I like it because I like it because the ATV should meet our sound level. I don't think sales is a huge issue in our county. I don't think there's many new ATV sales. It doesn't affect businesses selling their used vehicles, which is probably a lot more of the sales in the county. And yeah, I guess that's it. I just like that the ATVs will meet our land use code ordinances.
Yes, Kevin?
I think that if we are going, I mean, I guess I would be in favor on this aspect of either option 3 or just, option 4, which isn't there to not restrict them at all at this point. So I do think that, there are various ways of measuring sound, and our noise ordinance specifies. Actually, I take it back on that. So the argument for doing nothing is just, we're doing a lot of different things at once now with the ATV sales and rental restrictions and et cetera, not just on this motion, but over the next few weeks. And it's probably going to get a lot of scrutiny. And I think it might just complicate the issue if we're, trying to regulate sales in an unusual way that most communities don't do. And I don't think that we don't have any sales in the county at the moment. At least there aren't businesses that are devoted exclusively to sales. It's not an immediate cause. So I guess I would be in favor of continuing to think about these sales restrictions, but not trying to regulate them at this time, just to keep things simpler.
Thank you, Kevin. I like option 3 myself because most likely it's just proactive rather than reactive. That if someone wants to come in and start selling UTVs, ATVs, they already know what the boundaries are, rather than needing to react when and if such a company chooses to come to Moab, Grand County. So that's why I support 3. And I like the idea of having them apply, meet our noise ordinances. Anyone else?
I'd also like to add that I like the idea of incentivizing electric only and quiet ATVs, but I think at the sales spot, it might not be the place to do it. I think there's other ways to do that. But I very much like the idea of incentivizing the sales of quiet machines.
Anyone else?
I just wanted to comment on the clustering development definition because we have gotten some public comments about that. One of the complaints was that, this is most of the discussion and most of these amendments are about noise, and it has this feeling, I'm sure no one did this intentionally, of sneaking it in there. And I just wanted to reiterate what Christina said, which is, this is just taking language that already appears in the land use code under the planned unit development section and sticking it in the definition. So we aren't blazing any new ground here. We're just cleaning up the code to make different parts consistent. And so for that reason, I'm okay having this change in there because I do think it is kind of a minor technical change.
And it's section 4.4.1 is where the language comes from directly.
Thanks.
I guess I had a question for the eternity. For eternity. For the attorney.
Don't do that to me.
To Kevin's point, is this regulating the sales or that sort of business? Is this kind of towing the line, or is this pretty standard sort of stuff? I also could easily be persuaded to not even wade into these waters right now, but if it is just kind of like getting ahead of something that's not too contentious, I would prefer that.
Well, it's squarely legal, so we have broad authority to regulate businesses. It would be hard for us legally to say you can't sell ATVs at all, but none of these options propose that. So we're allowed reasonable regulations of what ATV sales look like. That's just very, very legal. Whether anyone else is doing it, I have no idea. I haven't tuned into that. I haven't researched it. But that doesn't normally concern us, what other people are doing. We're not like other people, right?
I am.
Well,
I don't know about you weirdos.
Okay, for the purposes of the discussion, then since there's at least one other person who's sympathetic, I'm going to propose an amendment, and then we can discuss and decide which way we want to go. And my heart won't be broken if my amendment fails. But I move that we amend the motion to strike the language that restricts the types of ATV that can be sold. I would still keep them segregated in use tables so that if we wanted to do this in the future, we would already be set up to do that. So is that?
Okay, there's an amendment on the floor by Kevin. Do I have a second? Does not appear to be a second,
Okay.
so the amendment passes due to lack of a second. Is there any more discussion?
Sorry, you said the motion passes, but
the amendment failed due to, that's what I meant. I apologize if I said something different, but the amendment failed. So we are back to the original motion proposed by Evan Clapper and seconded by Jacques Hadler. Any further discussion? I will call for a vote. All in favor of the motion, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. We are to item C, repealing Title V business licenses and regulations of the Grand County General Ordinance and related ordinance number 629 and adopting new Title V business license in conjunction with the proposed amendments to the Land Use Code. Christina Sloan.
okay. For some reason, it looks like the most recent copy is not in the packet, unfortunately. So I am going to screen share
I like
on this one.
I like the screen share because then
Okay.
I'm not going
So-
through.
Nice and big for everyone.
Mhm.
Okay, so this is Title 5. I have added definitions in yellow to split out ATV rental businesses from ATV outfitter and guide service businesses. It does specify that an ATV rental business may also provide outfitting and guide services, but an outfitter and guide service is not providing rentals. And actually, I probably should add an extra sentence, so I'll work on that here in a second when you guys are, so I'll have language for you when you guys are discussing this, so that those are parallel. And then it also splits out, so we've already have a definition for ATV fleet, but it also includes a definition for ATV rental fleet, which means they're driven by customers for their independent use for payment. We might not need those definitions if you guys don't want to make any if you don't want to distinguish between the businesses, we can eliminate those new definitions because there are a lot of choose your own adventures here. There's a lot here in these early sections. We have discussed it a lot. Here's one thing, 5.01, 0.070. It does require a different vehicle license. We haven't done that in the future. And that vehicle license, I've worked with the clerk's office about whether they'd rather have an ATV sales license, an ATV rental license, an ATV outfitter license. They don't want to do that. We're going to work with one general vehicle license application, and then there'll be check boxes about what activities you're conducting. And that'll be really helpful because right now our license is even more general than that. It does allow here a transfer. So of course we've proposed a cap on ATV businesses, and it seems like we have a strong consensus for that. But I have gotten a lot of questions about, well, what does that mean for an ATV business? It does provide a transfer process here in 5.01.120. So that is an asset that could be transferred like a river permit or, any of your federal agency permits. It acts exactly the same as that. Some of these changes, and I'm sorry, you're not seeing all the red line from our existing Title 5. I've given you those many times now in relation to what the Planning Commission approved. But we have strengthened our ability to deny and revoke licenses. None of that was in there before. Section 5.02 is sort of what we've been focusing the most on, and that's our motor vehicle section. We did previously require the fleets, but pretty much everything else is new. We have a new purpose section that the Planning Commission directed that this purpose section be included to specify that our primary concern is protecting our residential areas, but we do have a secondary concern of protecting our multi-use recreation economy. Hunters is highlighted only because it's the newest addition. I have to read Pendleton's comments. The first choose your own adventure is in the fleet section, 5.02.020. What the Planning Commission recommends is a total fleet maximum for any ATV business of 12 street legal ATVs. One of our businesses doubled their fleet overnight this week. So we now have a couple businesses that are around 26, maybe one more business around 13, and then a couple more under, or a few more under 10. Option 2 would be to only max out the rental fleets. And that was discussed expressly at our meeting. There seemed to be interest in that. So only the ATV rental fleets would be limited to 12. So outfitters and guides could have larger fleets. And option 3 would be no fleet maximum. I've also heard some interest in that. So I'm presenting that language to you. General regulations for ATV businesses. This is the section that has the meat of the businesses or the regulations. So the first one is the permit cap. And you get 3 options here. One would be a total cap, no distinctions. This is how the Planning Commission approved it. Option 2 is a total cap, but distinguishing between rental businesses and outfitter businesses, just to further ensure that, for example, ATV rental businesses would not expand. So under option 1, you have 7 business licenses, but only 3 of our ATV businesses are renting machines versus guiding. So that would allow an expansion. Option 1 is going to allow an expansion of rental businesses. Option 2 would not. It would cap us where we are right now. And then option 3 would be only capping the rental businesses and not outfitting and guide services. ATV identification, this is based on language in the BLM regs, and no one has opposed this, including our ATV businesses. Subsection 3 is our maximum sound pressure level. We spent a good bit of time on this in the last one. Option 1 would be that our businesses have to comply with the sound pressure levels in Title 11, and they would be tested on the stationary equipment test, which is your J1287 test that's set forth in Title 1 by someone at the county, and we haven't figured out what that looks like yet. We actually don't have a code compliance officer at the moment, but that's something we're working on. And this would allow an amortization into 2023, and I know there's some interest in talking through these dates. Option 2 is exactly the same, but the test would be by a drive-by test. I do want to make the point that your elected officials and our noise expert support option 1. And by elected officials, I mean Quinn, myself, and the sheriff. Option 2 is a drive-by test. I do want to make the point that, and I worked with the noise expert to figure out where would we do this within a couple miles of town. And we can do it in a big parking lot, but the county doesn't own any such big parking lot. So currently we don't have permission to do a drive-by test anywhere that wouldn't require ATVs to trailer or ATV businesses to trailer their ATVs to the testing site, which is the main reason that all of us electeds and the noise expert don't support this option. But there are options in town if we get permission, and the two best ones would be school district properties, the old Red Rock Elementary School property, or the parking lot at the high school, which I think we could do. The compliance certificate is due in January, so we could hold testing events in December while the school is closed. I have no idea if the district would let us do that or is supportive. So right now, if you're passing option 2, we don't actually have a site for that. And then in option 3, that's not here because Kevin proposed it late in the night, is to require both. And again, at least myself, the sheriff, and the noise expert do not support that. I don't know Quinn's position. D is maximum caravan size. This is also based on the BLM requirement of 6 ATVs traveling together, one of which must be a guide. In an unguided rental group, the maximum caravan shall be 4. So that would apply to our rental businesses, obviously not the general public. E and F for general. And there is a change in the overnight accommodations section, subsection A, and this is a recommendation Reed made, which is just to reiterate to guests, please operate your ATV, in a respectful way. And so that's language that he has proposed. I do want to make the point, because I got questions from one commissioner about this. As you can see, these 2 enforcement provisions, one's in the ATV business and one is in the overnight accommodations. This is language that the Planning Commission wanted to see, and it's a 3 strikes and you're out type of a situation. And it says that if a client of an ATV business or an overnight accommodations violates our ordinances 3 times in a calendar year, it shall constitute grounds for revocation of a business license. That doesn't mean the business license is revoked. That means the county would review it and make a determination. There is a lot of due process in our administrative appeals. So let's say that 3 clients of, I think it's, even sort of more controversial, this overnight accommodations one, but regardless, 3 clients in a calendar year violate an ordinance. The county reviews it, determines they were egregious enough, revokes the business license. We would provide written final decision of that. And then that business owner could request a hearing before our hearing officer, which is a third party who we hire. And then if they lose that appeal, it would go to district court from there. So there is a lot of due process in it, but I do want to bring it up because there hasn't been much focus on that. And then otherwise, those are the only changes. We already did that alcohol stuff before. So I think that's it for me, unless you have questions.
I have a question about adding the mandatory education piece that the Motorized Trails Committee brought up.
Why is it not there? It was discussed a little bit at the Planning Commission. No one seemed very interested in it. I would say there wasn't a lot of discussion, and I have to assume people didn't think it was an effective way to do this. Me personally, I find that we won't be able to enforce that. I don't want to be going in and looking at people's documents and seeing whether they have enough clients signing off and whether they watched a video, or enough clients who took a test, and I'm having to look at their tests. From an enforcement component, it's impossible. And, you know, I feel like the commission often sets up the county and staff to take a lot of heat from the community, because we don't have enough humans to do what some of the provisions in this legislation, not just this, but over many years now, we keep passing legislation that requires humans, and we don't have humans. And so we can't enforce that. So I don't support it. I think education is extremely important. I hope that every single ATV business is super committed to that on a voluntary level. But I can't enforce it, and I can't support it here.
To that point, I think that as you've highlighted, there's a lot of things on the books that we do a very poor job of enforcing. And I think that education would go a long way. I think our outfitters are already great partners in this. And I could see the travel council being able to, at the minimum, create a 2 or 3 minute video that people could watch either at home before arriving at the business, or that's just kind of playing at the business, pamphlets, brochures. And I would like to partner on that. And I think that that's, you know, regardless of if people are required to sign off on something, or just, you know, if a business can show that the educational stuff is available, I'd at least like to see a one-liner in there about mandatory education. I think a lot of these outfitters are already doing safety talks. They obviously do a vehicle orientation, and it's easy to include some trail and town etiquette as part of that.
I wonder whether it makes sense to start out with, you know, voluntary education, because we don't even have the materials set up yet. And then if we think that's effective, then we can make it mandatory later.
I love the idea of education, but I agree with Christina on the manpower. One reason the Throttle Down Committee ceased to pretty much exist, kind of fell apart, is because there was no one assigned in the county to distribute the materials we had to take to motels, to hotels, to get signs around town. It was like all these great ideas. We got the material and no way to consistently get them to the people that needed to distribute them. So I love the idea, but if we put it forth, do we have the money and the bandwidth to hire someone to just get the materials to the businesses and the overnight rentals and the hotels? If I would like to see that, I just don't know if this is the time to do it, if we want to look at adding this when we are in our budget session. And if we want to hire a part-time or a full-time person that will be distributing and getting the information to the various organizations.
I think that, you know, what we're kind of discussing right now is more of a gold standard. And I think that it would be easy to just kind of add something in that says, at a minimum, rental businesses must include a verbal orientation of town and trail etiquette.
Also on this code compliance, and we're going to be presenting some options to you, and I think that it'll be part of probably the community development department sort of reconfiguration. But what I'm advocating for is not only do we need a code compliance officer that is exclusively devoted to code compliance, and that's all the things. I mean, think about just our amortization period on the dark skies ordinance is coming up in the next year or so. We have absolutely no capacity to even survey businesses or to enforce it. You know, we get constant code violations and just don't have any humans to do anything about it. Then we have, you know, The HDHO is going to come with tons of enforcement issues. This stuff's going to come with tons of enforcement issues. But on top of that, not just do we need a code compliance officer, we actually need an investigator that works, a deputized investigator that works alongside that person to actually do the investigations. Because we also have law enforcement that are maxed out and having staffing issues, which is no new thing. It's going to continue to be that way. So just FYI, it's a big deal, in my opinion.
So I had two comments. One, I think Evan's most recent suggestion about just they have to give some kind of verbal thing and we can fill in the details later. I'm fine with that. I think that answers my concerns. And then procedurally, I'm wondering, rather than make a main motion and then have a series of amendments on these, where we discuss these option things, maybe we could just, do a series of, you get the sense of the commission on each of the choose your own, each of the options. And then once it's clear what a majority supports, then make a motion.
Yes, I was going to suggest something like that. I wasn't sure if we wanted to do straw votes or if we just wanted to break it up into various motions. But since it's not on the agenda as an action item in the various motions, I don't know if we could do that. But I do think we have to break it up to talk about it and come to a consensus. Should we do straw polls on each section? Is that what the commission would like to do?
I like that.
I'm okay with that.
And I think it'd be easier than having that many different motions. So let's move, excuse me? Did somebody say something? Let's go to the first.
Before you do
The
that,
fleet
Mary,
size.
Fleet size.
Well,
Yes,
but
yes.
I wonder, I know for some of us, our feelings about fleet sizes depend also on what kind of noise reduction measures are in place. So could we perhaps swap the order and discuss that one first?
Yes.
So which one, Kevin?
Yeah, you're at it.
Okay.
So I just to clarify the option 3, which is not on there, which is to do both a stationary test and the drive-by test. I think one thing that's changed since we last discussed this is I think many of us, including me, were assuming that the drive-by test was, the more effective test. It's going to catch more UTVs. It's going to, let fewer things pass and give more quiet to neighborhoods. And now I think that's less clear. So we actually, that might be true. I spoke with a noise expert this morning, and he thought in the field that was probably true, but under these controlled conditions, I think as Chris reported, it's less likely. But I think there are some unknowns. And I think it would be good, just understanding this relationship between the drive-by tests, which is closer to what we care about, and the tailpipe tests, which are under some circumstances more convenient to administer. If we had data on both tests, that would be really useful. And so, I don't think this is a technical question, but Chrissy said the noise expert does not support option 3. Actually, that idea of testing for both, he told me this morning, he thought that was a great idea because of the data gathering. So, so I think the option 3 kind of makes sense. We've got a noise ordinance, and all we're saying is we want, enforcing the noise ordinance in the field is difficult because we don't have enough officers. There's all these issues, but I don't think it's at all unreasonable to say that if you're going to rent an ATV, you have to, determine in advance that it satisfies our noise ordinance. That's all this is doing. We would be within our rights to ask the vehicles satisfy something stricter, and I think that's something we might want to consider in the future if the things in our noise ordinance aren't effective enough and we can't, for other reasons, think we can't lower the dB levels. But at the moment, what's on the table is just saying, we don't want you to rent an ATV that's illegally loud. I don't think that's an unreasonable requirement at all. So
And so with the option 3, is that you have to pass both tests, or is it you have to pass one of the tests?
you have to pass both tests, just the same way the noise ordinance reads. Oh, and I meant to address, so Chrissy brought up some logistical problems about finding a site and using trailers. We could either, we could put something in here that, if we have trouble, it's the county's responsibility to be able to administer the tests. And if we can't get it together and find a place, or we're worried about liability issues, we could just, give people a pass. So we certainly would have the option.
Yeah, and
Not true. That's not true. Our ordinance would require it. We can't just waive our ordinance.
No, I'm saying we could.
That's
put
why
something
I
in
love the
the
data
ordinance.
collection. I do. I think our ATV businesses will work with us. And so I think that my recommendation is still the stationary test. And then if we can find a site, then great. Let's invite our ATV businesses. I'm sure they will. And actually, the noise expert and I went and looked at every single ATV business, and many of them we could do the test just right on their property, but not all of them. And so I think we'll get that compliance, but I do like the data. I just have an issue with requiring both, where we don't have control of the property right now.
And was OSTA evaluated as a potential test site?
No, and that's a good point, but we did look, we were exclusively looking within 2 miles of town, and OSTA is not. And that is because that's based on the feedback we've gotten from our ATV businesses, that driving on paved roads at speed more than a couple of miles is damaging to the ATV. And so the noise expert, the sheriff, and I cannot support something that requires someone to trailer out of town. So OSTA, the road yard would be big enough as well, but it's the same issue. Those are a good bit, about more like 5 miles south of town.
I, for one, with the challenges involved in administering the drive-by for our businesses, am okay with starting with just the stationary and seeing how that plays out.
I like the stationary test. I'm a little bit more familiar with it. I think we've had a demonstration of it. I think it will still catch out a lot of ATVs, and I mean a lot, probably over 50% of the ATVs in the fleet, I think. I think the option to do a drive-by test in the future is good. Maybe we could even do something like have a mandatory stationary test, and at the same time we could test the drive-bys and see how it goes and collect data that way and come back to it in a year and potentially do a different test. But at this point, I'm much more comfortable with the stationary test.
I just think, once again, by requiring both, we have pushed ourselves to the situation where we do not have the manpower to do it. And I think that's a real important consideration, because it's frustrating to employees to be asked to meet a certain criteria and we don't give them the tools to do so. I would like to see maybe perhaps UTV businesses ask them that have the ability to be tested, do a drive-by test on their property, if they would be willing to do that for data collection, because I agree that data collection would be great. But I think at this point, I think we need to only have one test that is mandatory. And I think at this point, it should be the stationary. And then if it's not working, we add this drive-by. But I don't think we have the manpower to do both.
I understand the lack of manpower, power being a limiting factor, but what happens when there are complaints against specific vehicles? Would we then have the ability to enforce or test the other test? Or does that need to be specified?
Are you referring to complaints about a specific business that machines are?
Well, yeah, because this whole well, what this section outlines is that the UTV companies have to put big flags on the back of each of their vehicles. And if a specific business is getting, or if we're getting complaints about a specific business, would we have the ability to institute maybe a PI test or something like that as it's written, or would we need to specify that?
So if I understand you correctly, then like someone has like a really loud UTV go by their house and they look and it's a rental UTV because it's got that insignia. And maybe it's even a repeat offender. Do we have the ability to, to actually pull that vehicle over and test it somehow? It's because it's that specific vehicle is generating complaints.
Yeah, that's my question. Thanks, Kevin. Sorry, I didn't sleep very much.
Yes, and remember in B here, ATV identification, it's not just the company logo that's on there. It's also this unique county identifier. So every single ATV in an ATV fleet is going to have this number. So let's say Colorado 2 gets a complaint or gets 3 complaints, for sure. We're going to go test that machine. And for sure, for example, down here, let's say we do the stationary test, and let's say an ATV business, a third of their machines fail, and they choose not to modify them, then, those machines need to be trailered to trailheads. And then let's say we're going to have a list of which ones have failed and which ones have to be trailered. And then if we get a complaint about an ATV and we cross-reference that it's one of the ATVs that failed the test that's supposed to be trailered, well, that starts to become a real issue for that business and would put them.
But I think the concern of Sarah and I is there might be a vehicle that passes a stationary test, but out in the real world it's very noisy. And I think as option 1 is written, we're just out of luck unless we want to go out and actually just enforce our noise ordinance the regular way. We can't. I mean, it would be nice if there was. We have more control over rental UTVs than we do the private ones that come here.
Okay, so the first sentence says you have to be in compliance with Title 11, period. So that's all the tests. That's plainly audible. That's the drive-by test, and that's the stationary test. The certificate of compliance, if we go with option 1, is limited only to the stationary test. So yes, that vehicle still has to be compliant with the drive-by test. It would still be a valid, we would have the right to go and do that drive-by test and ensure that it's compliant.
So you're saying even under option 1, the county has the option to do drive-by test for all vehicles?
Yes, and it will not happen unless we have a code compliance officer who can help us.
Yeah.
But yes, we would have the option.
Okay, well, that's comforting. So without modifying Title 5, if we figure out, hey, we've got a convenient way to do drive-by tests, we can make that the county can insist that every vehicle have a drive-by test under option 1. Because I think that's actually equivalent to my option 3 before, where
we can't demand it outright based on.
But I think
if we get a complaint, we can.
Yeah,
we're not requiring it. I think our ATV businesses will help us collect data. I really do. And if we get a complaint against one vehicle, then we'll investigate that. Assuming we
okay, but I guess I'm trying to. You said they have to comply with Title 11. You said that means all of Title 11.
Yes, but we do not have the manpower to require to go out and make sure we're trying to strike a balance that works for the county as much as the ATV businesses. This is as much about the county and the burden on the county, quite frankly.
I want to make sure I understand. So what if we had that all ATV, UTV businesses, rental and guide, have to prove that their machines are meeting a certain standard, that they will all be required to take the stationary test. However, if we get complaints about a specific machine from a specific business, we have the right to go and ask for a drive-by test through the complaint option. And then to see if that works. Am I understanding right, Christina?
Correct.
Okay, so
a little more.
ATV businesses would be motivated to help us do this.
I think our businesses would be more than willing to work with us, because at this point they want to be good stewards in our community because they do live here. And I think that having this stationary test will be a good start. And if we have an outlier, do a drive-by. Yes, Sarah.
I might feel a little more comfortable if it was just, if there was a sentence in there that was a little bit more explicit about that. Like if complaints are lodged against a specific vehicle, county reserves the right to require a drive-by test, just because of the maybe disconnect between what the commission is desiring right now and compliance with, just to outline it clearly what we actually want to see.
Yes, I just want to make sure I understood Christina earlier, because she pointed out something in option 1 that I hadn't noticed before. Because the way it reads now, it says, shall not exceed maximum sound pressure levels established in Title 11. And so that includes the drive-by levels. And so right now, option 1 says they shall not exceed that. And then we go on to say that, we're going to pre-test on the stationary test sound levels. But I guess as I read this, if the county came up with the manpower, we could require them, to prove that they are not satisfying the Table 3 sound pressure levels as well. And if that's the case, then I'm satisfied, because it seems like the main objection for raising to option 3 was we might not have the manpower. And I think option 1 gives us the option, if we come up with the manpower to do that, then we can test the drive-by test as well.
It does not do that. So 1 says you have to be in compliance with Title 11. Keep in mind, statutory construction requires that omissions are purposeful, and they are purposeful. And it says to get a business license, you have to meet the stationary test. It does not say to get a business license, you have to meet the drive-by test. And that's a purposeful omission. So that's not correct. But what we could do is add a 3rd sentence to Sarah's point that says we reserve the right to test by the drive-by test in the event of a complaint.
I like that.
Except I would leave off in the event of the complaint. I think we should have the option, if we come up to manpower, we should be able to do it.
Then change the ordinance, Kevin. That's not how it's written.
Well, that's what we're doing right now. We're debating the ordinance. That's what I'm proposing.
I think we need to make that determination in the future. I don't see how we write in if we have sufficient manpower.
Well, no,
That's up to you guys.
We reserve the right to.
I think at this point, just having what Sarah suggested, that if there is complaints, that we do the drive-by test. And when we review if what, in time, we're going to be getting feedback from our community. And if we find out that what we've enacted is not making a change, we can review this every 2 months, every 3 months if we want. But I just think at this time, it's clear enough to me that we have the option of doing the drive-by test if we need to.
So I guess a comment on what Chrissy just typed in. I mean, typically these businesses have a number of identical, make and year models. And I think if one of them is generating a complaint, we might as well at least test all the similar ones, not just that particular vehicle.
There's plenty of opportunity for one particular vehicle to read differently than another of the same models due to damage on the trail or any number of factors. It might be a little bit older.
Right, but if, we're just trying to make sure that the vehicles satisfy our noise ordinance. So,
well, also,
doesn't do any harm.
If the companies, isn't there a provision in here where if the businesses aren't in compliance on multiple occasions, we have to revoke their business licenses?
Yep, that's new section G.
So there's an incentive there for the businesses to comply with the moving operational test to see if their vehicles work, because they don't want to be cited and then potentially lose their businesses.
I agree. Kevin, did you want to talk about the dates in the subsection 1 here?
Eventually, yes, but could you scroll back down to the subject? I couldn't find it on my copy.
G, enforcement. Violations of this section by an ATV business or 3 or more violations of this section by a client in any calendar year shall constitute grounds for revocation of the business license. Again, it's not automatic revocation. The county would undertake an analysis, make a final decision, and then there would be due process to that business.
And so what would count as a client violation?
A client's driving the vehicle.
So if the client, floors it or is exceeding a speed limit or something like that, and that happens more than 3 times, that would trigger item G?
Right. I mean, obviously we'd have to have proof of that. Some proof.
Right. But if we happen to be out in the field doing drive-by noise tests, that would be a way for this to happen.
Absolutely. And, the part of what I think we need our noise expert to do is work with our law enforcement agencies, both the sheriff's office and Moab Police Department, and develop a data management system. And part of that will be tracking these rental fleet numbers, right? So if they're citing a rental ATV, then that's the county identification number is going to be included in that citation. Okay,
thanks. I guess we kind of jumped in on a lot of technical stuff about drive-by and stationary tests, but I just wanted to back up and make a more general comment. Partly for people watching this on YouTube, because by now all of us commissioners are familiar with things and we don't bother to set the context. I think what our big goal is to make our residential streets quieter, and we're trying to do that with 2 ordinances: a noise ordinance, which we're not discussing today, which would apply to everybody and not just UTVs. I think there is this misperception that we're picking on UTVs, but the noise ordinance is for all types of vehicles. And then also, because we have more tools at our disposal for rental businesses, we're putting some restrictions there. And in my view, the general thing is, we don't want to give a business license to someone who's making things too noisy on our residential streets and lowering quality of life. We don't have to, and we're not going to do it. And all this technical language in here is an attempt to turn that into something, that can be administered and is enforceable. But I do sort of worry that we've lost track of that bigger goal. I guess my big concern about the stationary test is based on some preliminary measurements that we made a few weeks ago. We could have a UTV, and maybe initially it comes in at 91 decibels, in which case it's still really loud, but passes this, or maybe it's 93, but then it gets modified. A point that's been emphasized over and over again is many of these, I think Jacques said, this is going to catch after 3/4 of the vehicles. But I think an assumption in our previous discussions is that most of those vehicles are going to put on a special muffler, and that muffler isn't going to make them dramatically quieter. It's going to make them a little bit quieter, like to get down to, I think Cliff Kuntz maybe said a 3 dB difference. I'm trying to remember, but
yeah, 3.
Yeah. So the point, and I think the reason that some of us are hoping to include a drive-by test as well is it does seem that a stationary test is not going to make UTVs so quiet that we don't mind having them on our streets, and we're not going to notice when they drive by. So, I know, there's a lot of difficulties in reducing the quietude that much, but those difficulties are not nearly as big with rental UTVs because we really don't have to allow them on our streets at all. I think a much more straightforward option would just be, hey, you got to put them on a trailer. That's simple. That gets them off our streets. That's legal. So I guess.
One thing I want to point out, and I am going to do more of a presentation for the noise ordinance that goes through a lot of stuff for the public, because I can tell from our comments we're getting from the public, they still don't understand a lot of things. And I don't feel like the media has really broken it down either. And I know we cover a lot of stuff in these meetings. So I am going to do that before the noise ordinance discussion, but I also think it's important to point out that the drive-by test is a moving test. It's an operational test. And the reason the noise expert doesn't support it for a certificate of compliance is that ATVs make the most noise when they're decreasing and increasing. The drive-by test is not designed to measure either of those. It is designed to measure it once it reaches a certain speed. And a skilled ATV driver will meet the drive-by test. So his point was, of course, the owners of these ATV businesses are going to be experts and skilled drivers. So he doesn't think any of the ATVs in the ATV fleet will fail the drive-by test when driven by an owner or an agent of the ATV business. So he just thinks it's a waste of our time, and I agree.
I mean, I acknowledge it might, I think there's some uncertainty in the drive, how that will work out in practice. So that's why I think it's nice for us to have the option. But
I'd like to call for a vote where we find out how all the commissioners feel, if they want to go with option 1, option 2, or option 3. So I would like to get a straw poll on how our commissioners feel. Is that okay at this point?
And just
I think
option one as modified.
As modified. Option 1 as modified, which I really like. Trish, what would you
option,
like?
Option 1.
With the modification. Okay. Gabriel?
Option 1 is modified.
Kevin?
I still prefer option 3, but option 1 is modified is not so terrible.
Well, okay. Jock?
I'm in favor of option 1.
Evan?
Still option 1.
Sarah?
I'd go with option 1.
And I would too. So it looks like we're on option 1 for that section. So let's move to the next.
I am curious about talking about the date.
So there's another aspect of, is it inside option 1, Chrissy?
Subsection 1 is where the dates are.
Okay.
Oh yeah, let's go to the dates.
This yellow. So how it's written is each ATV business shall demonstrate compliance by next January. That is because that's a request of our clerk's office, which I absolutely support because they have duties all year long. And the January is our renewal period. January is the time they do business licensing by and large. Obviously we issue some throughout the year, but there's a huge push on business licensing in January. So it makes a whole lot of sense, 1, to give the ATV business community time to even figure out what this means for them and to then react, but also on the request of our clerk's office based on their schedule, demonstrating compliance by next year, next January is preferred. And then, but it does say, hey, it gives the ATV businesses a longer time to trailer their ATVs if they don't want or can't financially bring their fleet up to this requirement, then it would give them another year to meet this requirement if they trailer their ATVs in the meantime. And they would need to trailer all of them that they haven't demonstrated compliance with.
Yeah, so my thought is, I think a lot of people have been hoping that we can make our streets quieter this year, not in 2022. And I just waiting till, I mean, that January date seems to have been set because that's what's convenient for the clerk's office and that's when we do business licensing. But, you know, this is kind of an urgent problem. So I am, you know, sorry, Quinn, but I am quite happy to make your life more difficult if it'll get our streets quieter quicker. So I think, you know, I think the consequence of this is people are going to, some businesses already have trailers, some might need to buy them. I would set a date like sometime in July or something that gives people time to buy trailers if necessary. I don't really I certainly don't think we should wait in January just because that's what's convenient for the clerk.
I think that January is an appropriate time. I think these guys are neck deep in the season already. If we had passed this in January, that would be one thing, but I mean, it's April now, and I think that's a unnecessary burden for them. But that's my
I'm going to Yeah, I'm going to agree with Evan. I think January is, they have to do quite a bit, in certain cases. So I think that gives them adequate time to do that. And as Evan mentioned, they're in the heat of it right now. So I think that's, fair to both the business owners and Quinn.
But is it fair to the residents? That's what I'm concerned about. And I think it's not.
See, I think our number one issue needs to be looking at the residents. I mean, these are recreational vehicles. These are vehicles people are using to recreate, to have fun with. And it's great to recreate, and it's good for people to find recreation. But when a recreation vehicle is seriously, if a person's recreation is seriously taking away from the quality of life of residents who have lived there up to 50 years, that's a higher priority for me. I would like to see them in compliance before January 31st, because otherwise we have the rest of spring and fall where we have a whole bunch of people, and I think the UTV and the ATV businesses in town will do what they need to do quickly to get in compliance because they want to work with us. They've been very clear with that. So I think an earlier date, a reasonable earlier date that would be sufficient, even if we did it at the beginning of our fall season, which is usually July, August. There's not that many people. So, September or October to be in compliance. But I think when we're talking about something that's for fun, to do just for fun, that it shouldn't take precedence over people's quality of life that have lived in their homes, some of them since the 70s. That's my opinion.
When does our budgeting process start? Because I do think it needs to be, if we're going to move it sometime late summer, early fall, it should be before the budgeting process starts.
I think that usually starts in September, doesn't it?
September is the normal for the next year. We are going to have to do a budget amendment, a mid-year budget amendment before that probably though. But for calendar year 2022, we'll start around September.
So maybe September 1 of this year would be an option to require compliance if y'all want to push it up.
Yeah, I would like to see it moved up. I want.
For the sake of the straw poll, can we hear from the other commissioners?
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Jacques.
Okay. I think from a realistic standpoint, from what I've heard, January 31st seems okay to me. If we were to move it up, I think a date of September 1st, no earlier probably than September 1st would work. It slows down a little bit in the summer, and that would give businesses time to catch their breath and be able to have a chance to comply. So I wouldn't be in favor of any earlier than September 1st, but I'd probably be more in favor of January 31st.
So so you prefer which, Jacques? I got confused on that. So you are voting for January?
I'd be leaning towards January mostly because of what Christina spoke to as to the county's ability to get this done.
Evan?
I think Evan already spoke on the matter. I'll go ahead. I support January, and that's because I do think it is in the best interest of the community. I think that if we're not taking steps that are reasonable and actually attainable and not what I view as sort of pushing so many boundaries with capacity and also challenging the businesses in such a way, I see it as increasing and inflaming this situation and potentially creating a worse situation for the community. So I think that choosing January as a very reasonable and natural step to make this change is actually in the best long-term interest of the community.
Thank you, Gabriel. And Evan, you did say January. I'm writing this down so I make sure I don't make a mistake. You did say January, Evan, or did you say
Yes,
September?
I did. I
Okay.
like it as drafted.
Okay, Sarah?
Mary, I'm with you. I think that our residents are reaching a breaking point. People are talking about leaving. And I do think that we're going to start to see improvements in all of the small steps that are being taken. But I think September seems reasonable. There's usually a lull in the summer. And hopefully we can get a sound complaints officer on very soon and just make it happen.
Trish?
I would prefer January 31st, just on the overall logistics level. I'm okay with September 1st, but my preference is January.
Kevin?
Yeah, I definitely prefer September or even earlier. I think we just have to me, the consideration is how fast can we, test any vehicles that we think might comply, and can businesses get trailers for the ones that aren't going to meet the standard. I think, Mary, you said it very well. People have been putting up with this noise for years, and I just don't feel very good, as a county commissioner, telling residents you've got to wait an extra 3 or 4 months of putting up with this just because, that's what works best for the clerk's office or whatever. I think if we're going to solve this problem, some people need to stretch themselves, and that includes county government. And so I find it very disturbing that we're, doing less than we could as a county to get the noise to happen sooner. And I don't think it should take businesses that long. I think the fact that it's a busy season right now is not a sufficient excuse. And I guess I'm also, it concerns me that in discussing these options, I've been trying to keep track, but it seems to me a very large majority of the discussion is asking, well, how will this affect UTV business owners, and how will it be for them, blah, blah, blah. And we've spent very few words talking about, we've got options A and B, which will produce more quiet in people's homes. And I think that's the important point. It involves much more people. And I guess I'm a little bit puzzled that in this discussion and in previous meetings, we seem to be focusing on just one half of the equation. What we're trying to do here is balance, impacts on a small number of business owners versus impacts on a very large number of residents. And we seem weirdly focused on just the business owner side of that and don't commenting very much. So I guess I'm a little bit.
Kevin, for September.
And I would just like to say I disagree with that. I think that the decision, the January date for me is more about the county's ability to effectively do the job we're committing ourselves to. If we're hearing that there's a natural cycle revolving around business license renewals, I don't want to create more burden for the government to have a whole other step when they're already going to have to review the permits in January anyway. I mean, we're literally talking about doubling the load of an over stressed department in the county. So I think that we are taking actions that have not been done in the last 13 years since these became street legal. And unfortunately, government moves at a slow pace. And we're already talking about hiring more people to be able to accommodate all these additional registrations at the burden of the taxpayers. And I just don't want to add hours and hours of workload when there's already a process in place in January. So it's not about accommodating the businesses. It's about working efficiently as a government to save the taxpayers money.
What I hear from citizens, they want the streets to be quiet, and I am perfectly willing for the government to have to do that extra work.
Another issue, I ran an outfitter, not an ATV outfitter, but a different type. And things, when it's the height of the busy season, it's basically all you can do to maintain your business. I think the off season provides a great opportunity to retool Another thing I thought of, and this just came up because I actually had a friend who tried to buy a trailer about a month ago. You can't just go out and buy a trailer. You have to order them, and it takes a lot of time for that to be processed. If you can even find one, it took him months to be able to procure a trailer. He finally just received it, but I know that's not a huge issue, but it would be an issue for the clients.
I also think it's important to know how much our ATV businesses have already done, knowing that this is an issue, knowing that they want to balance interests of the community. Three of the businesses have already done near complete fleet turnovers to the Can-Am, which is the quietest sport model available, at great expense to themselves. So I do feel like Kevin in particular doesn't give our ATV businesses enough credit. I think that they'll be working hard, but I do think there's some real constraints on them as well. And I think that Gabe hits on something extremely important, that yes, the residential noise is the absolute priority, but we are working within a delicate legal framework, and I hope you guys will continue to keep that in mind.
You characterize some. I have not criticized any ATV business. I've said they cause a lot of noise. I have not, when you say I don't give them credit, I'm not really sure what remark you're referring to.
Well, you want to require the drive-by test because you don't think they're going to work with us. You want to require an earlier date because you don't think they're going to do everything they can to reduce.
I don't think I said that.
Well,
I've been very careful not to build.
I think we need to move on. I think this discussion could go on and on and on. And I can, I would like to see September. But I also understand the concerns of the clerk's office. I'm trying to get to a quieter place. I'm so sorry. And so it looks like we're going with January because the vote is.
Mary, you've muted yourself.
And I mute myself. January is. It's 4 for January and 3 for September. So I think this is an intense and difficult. We're working in an intense situation. We could discuss this forever. So let's move to the next item.
Okay. The first choose your own adventure was the fleet. Should we go back there?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so you have 3 options: a total fleet max, that's the recommendation of the Planning Commission, a rental fleet max, or no fleet max.
Okay, we have option 1, all, and 2, rentals, just rentals, and 3 is no. Okay, open for discussion and what people would like to vote for. Evan?
Yeah, you're gonna put me in the hot seat, huh?
Yeah.
I would.
I'll go first if you want to.
I will pass the hot mic.
Okay, pass it to Kevin. Kevin.
I suggested earlier that we talk about the some of these other issues before the fleet limits because they would affect things. And I think since we've seemed to have chosen the weaker options in terms of the date that this kicks in and not the strongest options we could have chosen about ensuring these things are quiet, that makes me very reluctant to go beyond what the Planning Commission was recommending in terms of fleet size limits. These vehicles are noisy, and we've been getting lots of complaints, and I think that's something we need to try to address. We're not obligated. This is perfectly legal to limit fleet sizes. I think is a crisis in our neighborhoods, and basically, we shouldn't be going out of our way to make things even noisier for our neighbors, and by allowing fleet sizes to increase, we're basically saying, to me, it sounds like it's not noisy enough now. Let's try to make it even noisier by putting even more UTVs on the streets when we don't have to. So I would go for the Planning Commission recommendation, which still allows some small increases in fleet size. Also, these different options distinguish between rentals and tours, and I actually do agree that that we should, given the opportunity, favor tours over rentals. I think the tours are better behaved, and so I definitely understand that point and why this is a valid distinction. But I think the place to do that might be in the context of handing out permits to sand flats if they go to a permit system in the future. But tours are just as loud as rentals. I guess, unless maybe they speed less, so only slightly quieter than rentals. So that's why I favor option one. Actually, it's not, option one.
Okay, thank you, Evan. Option one, Trish?
I think I'm going to go with the Planning Commission recommendation of option one.
Option one for Trish. Gabriel?
So I just want to make sure that our actions are directed squarely at noise. And establishing these new fleet maximums is basically, I guess going with option one sort of validates the current status quo, which many of our residents have already expressed is too loud. So I'm not sure. It seems to me that this isn't really a measure that is, I'm not sure how much this is actually sort of squarely directed at noise in that respect. I do understand that an expansion of fleets obviously can generate more noise. So I'm actually in favor of option two, because it would allow for expansion of these guided fleet inventories, which I do think I feel probably has somewhat of a natural cap in terms of how many guided tours a company is able to operate. And again, it's a situation where we're coming to some sort of action that has an interest in generating partnership and not generating this sort of contentious enemy-like relationship with this group of business owners. And that's what I want to support right now, because that's what I think is in the long-term interest of the community.
Thank you, Gabriel. Jacques?
Yeah, I'm not in favor of option one. I'm actually I'm between option two and three. I like option two in that it incentivizes tours, and I think tours are a great idea. I think it's much different going out on a chaperoned ride with a tour guide than it is for someone to rent a vehicle and go out on their own. So I would definitely prefer option two over option one. I also am giving strong consideration to option three. I think if somebody comes to Moab and they want to rent an ATV, if they want to drive an ATV, that they're going to find an ATV to drive. This is just county. I think we're not sure what the city's going to do. It could put county businesses at a disadvantage compared to city businesses. It could also incentivize somebody to open up an ATV dealership across the line in San Juan County and rent ATVs from there. It also would incentivize people to bring their own ATVs instead of renting one if they couldn't get one in town. And the ATV that they bring to town probably would be louder than one that's been vetted that they could rent from somebody in the county. And also it doesn't, when they come to rent a ATV from one of our businesses, then they're meeting somebody on the ground here, and hopefully, and I think that they will talk to somebody at that outfitter who will, let them know about etiquette and are ATV issues in town. So it gives them a point of contact here where they can get educated as to our issues. Whereas if they brought their own or they got one from somewhere else, they may not have that opportunity. So I would I'd definitely consider option 2, but I'm leaning towards option 3.
So you're voting for option 3?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Jacques. Evan?
Sorry, I was
Right.
unmuting. Yeah,
Okay.
I would, I think that the limit of 12 in option 1 is too low. If we think that we were gonna go with option 1, I would like, I feel funny rewarding the last minute fleet size doubling and limiting the folks who didn't do that to having similar size fleets. So with the idea that there's already operations in the county that have 20 something units, if we were going to go with option 1, I would like to see something much higher, maybe 25, 30, possibly even 40 units as the maximum. I would see that as, kind of limiting the explosive growth that we were kind of concerned about by limiting the total number of permitted businesses. I could also entertain option 2 that would just address the rental fleet sizes. But I couldn't support option 1 as written at 12. But that's just my one vote.
So what did you finally vote for, Evan? Are you vote 2 or 3?
You can make it option 4.
I guess I would go option 1 at 25 instead of 12.
Option 1 at 25.
I'm good with that also.
Sarah?
I'm definitely most supportive of option 1 at 12. To Jacques' point of if people aren't bringing their own UTVs, they're more likely to be in compliance. That's why we have the code ordinance. We're hoping that people bring UTVs that are in compliance. And when we put the whole burden of supplying all the UTVs on these 5 locations, that means anybody living on the path from one of these locations to any of the trails is just bombarded constantly if we allow exponential growth. So I think limiting is really important. If just real quick to speak on this, if we limit it at 12 as it is now, and we've heard over and over again that we can change this in the future. And so if we see a market improvement, or if these businesses prove that their interests are the interests of the community and they work with the BLM on permitting processes in sand flats and around town, then I could see the expansion of only guided tours to work in concert with those other processes. But I mean, we can limit it right now, and I think that we should. The community asked us to put this moratorium on. That's what we're trying to address right now. If we were going to limit rental fleet maximum, I feel like it's really difficult. I know this was like kind of my idea, but I feel like it's really difficult to distinguish between which vehicles are being rented and which vehicles are on tours. So if we were going to go with that, I think we need to change the definition of rental fleet maximum or rental fleet to include all UTVs in a rental business, just so that we're not seeing, just so that it's at all enforceable. So we put limits on on those rentals, but I'm for number 1.
That is a good change for 2, if that's the will. I agree with that change in the definition.
If I could have a suggestion on 2, could there be a way that we could compel businesses to designate their rental machines, and then they could have a, that numbered flag or sign could be of a different colored background? Is that,
Yeah.
I guess that's one idea.
Yeah, I myself, I would, this is a tough one because in so many ways, I think the problem in the community is more to do with the people that are coming into town than our businesses. And I understand why we're focusing on our businesses, because we have some control. I mean, it's in some ways the low hanging fruit. I would like to see, I think I would be for option 3 if we specified that the only type of vehicles they could buy were ones that hit the 88 decibels or were electric. Then we're not, I think then we're encouraging the type of machines that won't be a problem on our streets, as opposed to and I like the idea of guided tours, just because I do think, and I've watched, and the cowboy tours, they really do a great job of keeping their machines quiet as they go through town. And I've watched the tours, and they're encouraged to do that. But when they're rented, it's a different thing. So I'm rambling. I guess mine would be that I could go for option 3 if we said that they could increase their fleets if they were electric or hit the 88 decibels.
Just to be clear, an ATV cannot get to 88 dBA today.
What was that one? Excuse me. Yeah.
An ATV cannot get to 88 dBA under the stationary test today. We hope to work with industry to get there in a few years. We don't know how long it'll take industry to react. It's also my understanding that we're 6 months to a year away from electric ATVs. And based on the information that Scott McFarland and that agent shared on our ATV business meeting, it's my understanding the price point's about double for an electric ATV, just information. Also, as part of that ATV business meeting, the Fleet Max was the only issue the ATV business community really had an issue with. They certainly threatened to sue us over it. That's not a surprise. I do think we win that litigation. This is very similar to what we did with the overnight accommodations regulation. So I do think it's legal. There was a discussion of increasing the Fleet Max if we went that way. And I don't know that I could say there's a consensus of the ATV business community, but they felt a lot less threatened, and the number 25 was thrown out in that meeting, and I got the vibe that was a lot less threatening. Overall, I don't support the Fleet Max myself, because I feel like we need to move forward with baby steps and reassess continually what is working, since this is such a grand noise experiment. We're doing something no one in the country is doing. So that's just additional info.
So I had some comments on option 3 and option 1. One is that I think at the beginning of this discussion a few months ago, I was in favor of option 3, because I thought, in other places, we could get UTVs either to be very quiet, not noticeably different than a car, or on a trailer. And if that was happening, then it doesn't really matter so much how many there are, because it's not causing that much additional noise. But now, for various reasons, those assumptions are not the case. I think we're waiting a long time to impose noise requirements, and the ones we are imposing are seeming less effective for probably a couple of reasons. So that makes me more in favor of putting some kind of limits. And then addressing specifically some of the things Evan said. Evan didn't like the fact that different businesses would have different number of UTVs to rent, but if we're going down that path, we should also think about the city. I mean, from an UTV rental point of view, your competitor, it doesn't matter if your competitors are inside the city limits or not. And some of the city businesses, Chrissy, do you know the max? It's really large, like 70 or something. Some of
Scott
those
McFarland has the largest, and it's my understanding it's more like 100 units.
100. So, so by that logic, we should set a cap that it would be 100, which of course is a kind of a meaningless cap. But I guess my other comment is, with hotels, we didn't try to equalize the number of rooms that each unit had. We just capped things in place because there were too many and it was hurting our community. And it surprises me that's a step that we found very easy to take with hotels. And there's a lot of overnight accommodation business owners in our town. And I think by the same logic, we should really just cap the numbers in place. I think it's also worth keeping in mind that 3 years ago, and I'm thinking both city and county now combined, there were a lot fewer UTV businesses. So there's been a recent explosion, and I really don't see why we have to lock that in. That we have this informal rule that once a business gets established, it has to be around forever. I mean, I think we should work toward just fewer businesses, but I think a minimum is at least stop the growth until we get a handle on the noise situation. So.
I had a question for either Quinn or Chrissy. In terms of option 2, do we know the option 2.2 or whatever about limiting of just kind of lumping the rental fleet together with the total fleet for those 3 rental businesses? Do we know their current fleet sizes, the 3 that are currently renting?
We know their fleet sizes, but we don't know whether those units are used just for rentals or for rentals and tours, because as you see in red, our prior inventory didn't require the use to be specified.
Assuming that those units do double duty as rentals and tours, what's the total fleet size for those 3 companies?
If it's supposed to, so Canyonlands by Night has our largest total fleet at 26, but it's my understanding they only rent 4 of those machines. Only 4 of those machines are street legal, and the other 22 are not. Side by Side has less than 10, and Cliffhanger only has 1 ATV they rent. So let's call it 15 total rental units in the county right now, as far as I am aware.
Sorry, what was Side by Sides?
Less than 10.
Okay.
Let me stop screen sharing. And
That's
So I'm calling him 10, but it's less than that, I'm pretty sure. But I can.
Okay.
Oh, I'm wrong. 13.
That's the total fleet size?
13 for Side by Side. So +4 +1, 18
Okay.
total, as far as I'm aware.
Okay, it looks like, let me look at it again. It looks like we have 4 for 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 4 for 1, 1 for 2, and 1 for 3. And as far as I'm really struggling here because I don't know how effective having I'm just not sure how much this is going to help. I think our people that rent and tour, especially the ones that do the touring, do a better job of managing the people that run them. But I don't know if I could say that I'm just not, I would like to vote for number one until there's a possibility of having quiet machines and then move it to number three, if that makes sense. But I think that's impossible to write. So I guess I'm going to vote for number three because I just don't think that limiting the fleet size is going to punish. I don't know how much it's going to help. I just don't know how much it's going to help. So I'll say 2 for 3. So it looks like 1-1.
Mary, my
with 25, is that what we wanted? Was it with 25 rather than 12?
I'd like to see it at 25.
So Trish is 25. Kevin?
Please share again.
Yeah, if you can share again, that would be helpful. I mean, I liked option 1 with a number of 12 or lower, but if it's going to be 25, then I have to look more carefully at the other options.
We could write in Mary's idea. An ATV fleet shall not exceed 12 until such time as all ATVs in the fleet can meet an 88 dBA maximum sound pressure level. So we could.
Yeah, I like that because it incentivizes, hopefully maybe, we are a big UTV, ATV community, one of the places known for it. Maybe it will incentivize our manufacturers to get quieter machines.
I'm fine with that option.
My struggle with this is the difference that I see between a business like a hotel that has like a floor plan. They had a very clear business model going into it. It's unlikely that a hotel will have gradual annual expansion each year. I think as an outfitter, they can kind of get their foot in the door with a couple of machines and plan to grow that business 3 or 4 years, whether that's an ATV business, whether that's a rafting company that starts with 1 raft and then moves to 20, whether that's a bike shop that starts renting 6 bikes and then expands. I think that a lot of these folks had a long range plan. We can see that, when they see the threat, they doubled some fleet sizes overnight. And I can respect that. I think that they have all voiced really reasonable efforts to comply with the sound. I think that they are our best tool in education. So I really don't feel like I can go with the max fleet size of 12. So that's my 2 cents on option 1.
If I can advocate real quickly for option 2, if anyone still might be on the fence as this continues to evolve, if we were to create the rental fleet maximums, that would ensure that would allow businesses to expand and address some of these concerns that Evan brought up, but it would ensure that any more machines that would be a part of UTV businesses would receive the education, the supervision, and the guidance of the tour companies, and it continues to place them as a partner in this whole problem. So I think it's a pretty good middle ground solution, and especially it would have to be linked with the other action, which would be to separate rental type businesses and make sure that the guiding businesses weren't also then increasing their rental fleets. So that's all I have to say.
I mean, I agree with Gabe, but one problem I see there is that would allow a really big expansion right now in UTVs that are just rented straight off the lot in the county. So I would propose freezing that at its current level. Oh, wait, I'm sorry.
That's kind of what I was trying to get at. Yeah.
The definitions. if we change the definition of rental fleet, that stops being a problem.
I can live with option 2. I think I said clearly I prefer option 3, but option 2 is something that I could live with as a compromise. I definitely think that a guided tour is different than a rental, and I'd much rather see people on guided tours than otherwise.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jacques.
What about a fleet cap of like 18, allowing 3 full tours to go at one point in time, which means they could probably get like at least 6 tours a day, if not 12 tours a day. Full tours with 6 vehicles each.
That was an option 2 or an option 1 adjustment, Sarah?
Oh, option 1.
What was it, Sarah? I missed that.
Oh, just like an 18 cap, which would allow 3 full tours to go at one time.
I guess I just want to reiterate, I guess we still have it on there, Mary's idea that if there is an expansion in fleet size, it's for vehicles that meet the higher 88 tailpipe standard.
Yeah, sorry.
And I think if when the electric ones come into fruition, I'm sure we could find some ways to work with the state and work with different things to perhaps assist with the cost, find some ways to incentivize, and so that we can slowly move to quiet machines.
And as electric machines come out, I think that the longer they're out, the lower the cost will be. I mean, that's just kind of
like solar panels. Yeah, just like solar panels are coming down, certain things are coming down, okay, so we're all over the board. So on this now, we have on option 1, we have it now. We're debating between 18 and 25. And then we're saying that until such time as all ATVs in the ATV fleet can meet or are electric. So let's go back. I'm gonna let's
had 4 votes.
Option 1 had 4 votes. Everybody that voted for option 1, are you comfortable with moving to 18 or 25, or everybody should be able to vote on that? And do you like the addition that until such time?
I think we should take a straw poll on each of the 12, 18, or 25, and each commissioner pick one. See if we have consensus on that, and then take a vote on the.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay, Trish, 18, 25.
Or 12, 18, or 25.
Hey, before we vote, I just want to clarify what it means. So if we have the noisier, bigger than 88 UTVs, option 1 is still allowing an expansion to 12 or 18 or 25. It's just that to be unlimited it would be for Mary's 88 standard. Is that correct?
Do you want to vote on the 88 standard first, and then that would inform your decision on 12, 18, or 25?
No. I'm just trying to understand. I guess I should just read more carefully what you wrote. I first understood Mary to propose, and I think maybe I misunderstood her, that basically no expansion at all until the fleets meet this 88 dB standard. And then there's no limits if they're below that standard. But what's written, I think, is a little bit different from that. So that's what I wanted clarification on.
I think what I meant was I was satisfied with what the Planning Commission came up with, the lower fleet size, but they could move as high as they want as long as it hits those standards.
Okay, thanks.
So I guess I was voting for saying I supported 12, keeping it that low until. But I would go with 18 or 25 too. That's not a big point. like to work to find a way that we can make these machines quiet, because they're not going away, but I'd like them to be quiet. Okay, so back to Trish. 18, 20, 18. Gabriel?
It's 18.
Kevin?
I would say, if we're allowing unlimited expansion for the quiet ones, I think the number should be 12 or preferably less than 12. I think the expansion should be for quiet machines, not the noisier ones.
Jacques?
And the quiet machines would be sometime in the future because they don't exist now. So this would be for now. If I was to choose a number, I'd go with 25.
Evan?
I'm also for the 25, but I appreciate some wiggle up from the 12. So,
Sarah?
For the sake of manipulating this in a way that creates a majority at 18, I'll go with that. But I would prefer the lower one. So I want people to know I'm reasonable.
Well, it looks like 18 has, and I think, I don't know, I don't care. I want the 12 and I want, 12 or 18.
Oh, dang, I didn't know Mary hadn't voted.
So let's, I'll go with 18, and then it's somewhat of a compromise between the 25 and 12. Okay, so it looks like it's 18. With the caveat that when they become possible. And
Should
it's
we
not
vote
going to be
on
that
that or
far.
everyone likes that? Is that the consensus?
Can we go with that it's 18? Is anybody opposed to that? With the straw poll? Okay. Where are we at, Christina?
Okay, I think this is our last choose your own adventure. It is.
sorry, is there some kind of caveat about the rental portion of that fleet not expanding?
Nope.
Or is, okay.
Not as
Okay.
So Evan, were you thinking of some kind of combination of one or two where that there's no expansion of a rental fleet, but the tour fleet could expand according to what was described in option?
Yes. Yeah.
I think that's better than just the plain option one because it's more restrictive. So I would support that.
I also would, because I really support education, and that's not possible with just a lot.
And I think many of us have expressed that we want to, give incentives for tours, which and I think there are differences between tours and plane rentals.
I guess just with the thought in mind that there's some operations that only have 4 or 1 rental unit, I would hate to see them just completely transfer over to 18 rental units and 0 guided. So I understand that there's a difficulty in distinguishing between which units are which, and on different days of the week, they might, feed different needs, but I don't know the best way to capture that.
Well, we could cap it. So, and a rental ATV fleet shall not exceed the size disclosed in the inventory filed prior to adoption.
Yeah.
I would not be opposed to that after raising the total size from the Planning Commission's recommendation.
So again, the thing that's on the table now is there's going to be no increase in the rental fleets. The tour fleets can expand to 18, and they could potentially expand beyond that if machines get quieter sometime in the future. Is that your sense of it, Chrissy? Is that what you're?
Yes. And so I don't forget, we need to work on the definition, because I think that that is an important point that Sarah brought up. An ATV rental fleet means all ATVs owned by an ATV rental business, period, I suppose. I don't even know what. Oh, and that's not true. So I think that, oh dear, just period. That's what that would look like. Or, I mean, this was Sarah's proposal. The other one being how I had written it before, which is ATV rentals are those that are rented independently. And yes, there would be some enforcement issues there. However, we would require into the future that they tell us which is which. Although this is more consistent as written here, as you're looking at with the information we have today. So we would just call all the units owned by an ATV rental company, ATV rental units. So again, we think that's 13, 4, and 1.
So, sorry, but that the 4 is just a portion of the total fleet that Canyonlands by Night has.
Right, but the other units are not street legal. So they only trailer those and guide them.
But I guess that, how does that definition capture that a single business has?
Oh. Doesn't.
Right.
So grandfather.
Yeah.
The full.
So the ATV rental fleet means the portion or the count of ATVs. I don't know.
This is how I had it before. An ATV means all ATVs rented or leased by a customer for their independent use for consideration. ATV rental fleet does not include ATVs driven solely by customers during a guided tour.
If we froze the rental fleet sizes, could we bump up the guided fleet? Is there any interest in that to the 24 so that it's 4 6-person tours?
Yeah, I would be open to that in the future if it looks like these measures are effective and things are getting quieter. But I wouldn't want to do that before we see how effective our other measures are.
Anyone else?
I agree with Kevin.
I don't have an issue with your proposal, Evan.
How about Gabe? Freeze the rental portion as is and raise the total to 24?
I'd do 24.
I mean, I think we need to think about our residents who live right next to these businesses and like what that does to them or live along the route. It's a significant increase in traffic.
So what you're saying is let the rentals increase, but don't let let the guided tours increase, but not the rentals.
Yeah,
correct?
I guess.
Okay, I could go with that. And then with that caveat that if they get quiet machines, then there's not a limit.
Yeah, and the thought is at least one of the businesses is already at that limit. So that business wouldn't be allowed to.
2 businesses are.
What's that?
2 businesses are.
Yeah, so 2 businesses are already at the limit. So this would just kind of allow
I'm sorry, at which limit?
If we bumped it up to 24, if we froze the rental portion of the fleets where they are,
yeah,
but allowed the other guys that didn't go out and double their fleets overnight when they saw this coming down the pipe, if we allowed them to catch up to the other two businesses that already have the larger fleets, that's kind of what I'm proposing.
Okay, but I guess I don't think that any business has 24 street legal ATVs. You were saying their businesses.
Epic has 24 street legal ATVs.
Oh, they do.
Actually, they have 26.
Okay.
Or at least as disclosed in the inventory, which I have not confirmed, but as written, they would be, have vested rights to the 26.
But they just barely did that. So effectively it would be them forcing our hand and bumping the limits up just because yesterday they bought that many.
I mean, I guess it does bother me that we're setting levels not on what we think is good for the community, but just on, what a certain business happened to do. I mean, this just doesn't seem like a rational decision.
No, my point, Kevin, is that as what we were just considering and kind of gave a head nod to, there was no distinction between rental and guided. So instead of hiring more guides and et cetera, someone could just expand their rental fleet to a higher number. They could triple their rental fleet from what it is now and not offer more chaperone tours. So
no, I agree with that part. I mean, treating the rentals and tours differently, but speaking only about tours and deciding what the maximum level to be, it seems like we're trying to set it at, we've got a variety of different levels and we're just choosing the highest one we see. And that just feels a little arbitrary to me. That's all.
Well, I think the highest level was no restriction.
No, the highest level that exists at a business. That's the point you brought up earlier. You didn't like the fact that
right,
guys had 24 rentals and the other only has 8, and that might be frozen in place.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we should go back to the 18 straw poll that won. It seems reasonable to me.
I was just throwing things out. If there's not support for it, I'm okay with the straw poll at 18.
But we can also, I mean, that's also an easy thing to offer an amendment for once we get to the main motion, if you think there's majority for it.
Are we moving on?
Yes.
Okay. Last choose your own adventure is the business cap. You have 3 options. One is a total cap of 7. Now that we've frozen the rental fleet, that's probably sufficient because it wouldn't allow growth in the rental business. At the same time, I do think option 2, which is just specifying the different business licenses, is a little bit more accurate and provides notice to everyone what we're doing. But 1 or 2 really are pretty much the same now. And then 3 would cap only rental businesses.
So between 1 and 2, which do you think is better, Christine?
I think 2. And so just to be clear, this is freezing the caps exactly where they are. We have 3 businesses who are renting machines, who might also be guiding, that's included in the definition. And we have 4 businesses that are only guiding.
And those definitions say that the rental businesses are allowed to guide.
Unless I just messed it up because I changed it. Let's see. An ATV rental business means all businesses that rent or lease ATVs for independent use, blah, blah. An ATV rental business may also provide ATV outfitting and guide services.
I'm okay with the distinction, the option 2.
I'm good with option 2.
I like option
2.
Okay. Option 2. Anyone want a different option? Okay, option 2. Is that I think we're to the last choice,
That's it. Is there anything else that wasn't a choose your own adventure that you guys want to discuss or have questions about?
I keep trying to move the screen.
One other thing that's worthy of discussion that was brought up is this ATV identification, whether you guys want to require a distinction between rental units and others. That's not.
I think that would be helpful for enforcement, wouldn't it?
Mhm.
And for data collection, because it would help us, that would make it a lot easier to determine whether, because see, I really feel that the main problem in the community isn't the businesses as much as the people that just come in. And if we had a distinction between the businesses and just people that are coming into town, it would help our decisions later on, because we'd say, oh, the problem really isn't the businesses, the problem is. And I like the distinctions for just the data collection alone.
Okay, I'm realizing one that I don't actually specify their logo has to be on here, which it does. So identifying the business name and logo. Then the whip flag was Andrea Brand's idea, and she feels passionately we need that, partially because, for example, in Sand Flats, she can see when an ATV is off trail, but because of the topography, she might only be able to see the top of it. And so she can't radio in like which ATV it is. So she wants the whip flag so that when there's a ATV violating the rules, she can say, oh, that's this company, or, maybe these numbers. So I think the whip flag and this other sticker should have the number. Is that what you guys think?
Yeah, Andrea's the one that's the feet on the ground.
Yeah.
She's the one doing the work. I want to listen to what she says.
So I think, Sean, so one is sticker identifying, and two, a whip flag. Oh, so only the whip flag would have the unique number. I think that's fine. Okay, so I don't need those. I thought I was going to get more complicated. And then I think how we can do it is unique number, blah, 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 etc. for, let's do it like this, COR1, COR2 for ATV rental fleets. That's a defined term. And CO1, etc. for additional ATV fleets or something. Let me see. Well, actually, that would be, the numbers will not correspond. So each business shall install a sticker identifying the business name and logo with a white background and large black numbering on the rear or passenger side of an ATV. That is consistent with BLM requirements. And sorry, this 50 foot needs to apply to all of it. And a whip flag.
No big boy.
Remove this. Identifying each ATV and the ATV fleet by unique number provided by the county, COR1/2 for ATV rental units, and blah for additional ATV units. Which sticker and whip flag shall be of a size that is legible from 50 feet. Within 10 business days of filing its ATV fleet inventory required hereunder. The 50 foot is the logo, and the 50 foot are similar to BLM regs. They do not require the whip flag. So that would be additional. Everyone like it? Anyone have feedback or concerns?
Looks good to me.
Anything else to discuss? I'm ready for a vote or a motion.
Can someone capture? Well, I guess we could just make a motion as agreed through the straw polls. Would that work? I think that'd be a lot easier than somebody trying to capture everything that we did.
I think the motion would be as presented in the final draft, considered during the meeting. Because now I've changed everything. So this has all the options that won the straw polls. One thing, I added this education quickly. Each ATV business shall provide education to each client or customer regarding trail etiquette and accounting noise ordinance. Do you guys want, I guess speed limits maybe should be in there?
Yes. And the speed limits do help. I know they're a nuisance, but I hike to the top of our mountain, the hill behind our house, and I can watch the UTVs, ATVs going up towards sand flats. And the ones that are crawling up the hill at 15 miles an hour, I can't hear from top of the, you know, where before I could always hear them.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything besides speed town etiquettes that we want to capture, but it seems pretty good there.
So you say trail etiquette, maybe that should be trail and street etiquette.
Okay, I'm going to stop screen sharing.
Okay. Would someone make a motion, please? Sarah?
I'll do it. I move to repeal Title V Business Licenses and Regulations of the Grand County General Ordinances and related ordinance number 629 and adopt the new Title V Business Licenses of the Grand County General Ordinances.
Motion by Sarah. Do I have a second?
I'll second it, Mary.
Thank you, Trish. Any more further discussion? I would just like to say something in conclusion before we move on, you know, before we vote. I just wanted to address that I would like the heat in the town and the name calling and the pointing fingers at each other from both sides to tone down. I'm hearing that there are people who hate ATVs, don't like ATVs, are being pretty rude and inconsiderate and yelling foul language at people as they leave rental places. That does not bode well for anyone. And I'd also like to see that UTV businesses and people that are UTV advocates stop pointing at everyone else and saying, we hate you. That's far from the truth. If I hated you, I'd be hating many of my friends and some of my family. We don't like the noise. That's very different from saying you hate the person that drives them. And we're working really hard to deal with this issue, and I think things would move a lot faster and work a lot better if both sides take a deep breath and start treating each other with respect. Thank you. So any other discussion?
Yeah, no, I agree with what you just said, Mary, that, you know, we shouldn't try to personalize this, and it isn't about, I mean, you know, when I try to decide, you know, what's the correct balance between, you know, preserving quiet in residential streets and making life difficult or easy for business owners, I assume that the people, you know, in their living room and also the people in the businesses are all great people who are just trying to get along. So I think, you know, even though, you know, we know there are a few bad apples, but I think in making these decisions, we want to assume that everyone's acting in good faith. I do think that there's quite a few things we could have done with this land use code to make things quieter that we chose not to do. And I find that a little bit disappointing, but the flip side of that is I think the UTV community should know that these are actually, I think, very mild restrictions compared to what we legally could have done. And I guess I also hope that if this doesn't make things quieter and we're still getting noise from rental UTVs, we'll reconsider this in the future and try stricter measures.
Thank you. Okay. I will call for a vote. All in favor of the motion, raise your hand, say aye. All opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. This has been a long week of many meetings. I know I've spent time on the phone. I hope the community recognizes the work and the effort that all 7 of us have put in, plus Christina, Chris Baird, Mallory. We've taken this very serious, and we want to do what's best for this community. So we have reached the end of our agenda. So if no one is opposed, I will adjourn this meeting. Thank you. I'm going to be staying on for agenda review. Okay. Are you going to have to leave, Gabriel?
Sorry, I do. Yeah.
Okay.
We'll circle back. Thank you.
Gabriel, if it's all, I'll do my best.
All right.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone.